then. So it's been amazing. So what I'm going to do is introduce Amy Wilkinson. Amy is the TPS director at Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville. I know I had Carbondale on there. I apologize. So I quickly went into the board, into course board and changed that. But, and I know better, Amy.
That's
but
okay.
Amy has been involved with this for quite a while. She's been on national committees with the library. She has done a lot of exceptional training and professional development and has contributed so many good lessons and ideas on their site that are free for anybody to use. So this morning, our focus is on inquiry learning. And so, Amy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Let me go ahead and share my screen.
I can see you.
Yeah, hold on. It's coming. Is my screen shared yet?
I can see you.
But not the PowerPoint.
Not the PowerPoint.
All right. Maybe I didn't. Oh, here we go.
You got it now? There you go. Oh, there you go. Great.
All right. So Danielle, whether it was you or Seven, I wanted to keep this informal. So you can speak out at any time or chat. Lucy will let me know if you typed anything that I can address. So whatever you're comfortable with. So yeah, inquiry-based learning, of course, is all over the standards. And I think that it's rather, it's a rather new thing in our standards, but not necessarily new to the classroom. So when I speak with groups and teachers and work with other educators, we're all from different districts. So we all have different information that's given to us and different ways of doing things, different curriculum. So I always like to start out by talking about what inquiry looks like for us in our classroom. Because it's always about how we're re-envisioning or looking at what we're doing and what others are doing. As an elementary, are you an elementary, middle, or high school, Danielle?
I'm actually a kindergarten teacher.
Okay. I come from the first grade realm, so early elementary is my realm. So if you have particular questions about that, make sure you ask them. But I have worked with K through 12. It's probably been, this is my 16th year in the TPS program. But I've had the great pleasures of really learning from a lot of great teachers over the years. We help each other grow. We mentor one another and coach one another. So that's where all the learning that comes from when I share. So the next question I wanted us to explore today, and this is purely an introductory type of thing. It helps us kind of dive into what inquiry is for us. But what can primary sources do to improve student inquiry skills in STEM? I can even argue that it would just, what can primary sources do to improve inquiry skills? But we are going to really take a look at these NGSS standards and their the 5E. So we're going to apply that more closely. The Library of Congress has a model. There's many different inquiry models out there. Have you noticed that, Danielle?
Quite a few, yes.
Yes, there's quite a few. So I want to introduce the libraries, and you might have seen this one already if you've taken something with the Library of Congress. This is made by Barbara Stripling. She is a librarian, so she comes from an information research background. So if you're going
What are you doing, Mom?
So cute. When you come from a research background, librarians are always trying to help students and other people engage in these sources. So they want to know how they connect to them, right? How can we connect to this source we pull? How do we develop questions? How do we evaluate information through that investigation? How do we construct new understanding? So how does it interact with what we know? It's kind of a little bit like the KWL, right? In terms of having new understandings. And then how do we apply that in new context, right? And then express it and actually start transferring what we learn. And how do we get kids to do that? And then how did we get them to also reflect on their learning and continue that? That anything that they learn doesn't end as soon as the lesson ends.
Ooh.
So kind of a general inquiry model. Then we've got the introduction of the 5E model of instruction. So we've got engage, explore, explain.
Okay, that's okay.
Go ahead, Amy. Extend and elaborate and evaluate. So when you notice that, if we just kind of take a look, actually I got to move my little, I've got my chat window in the way. You'll notice that, take a look at engage, explore, explain, extend, elaborate, and evaluate. Do you notice any differences?
What?
And maybe Lucy, you can even chime in.
I will. I'm just trying to
Take a look.
yes. I was trying to kindly just have the volume turned down on the phone. I can't control the phone volume.
So you'll notice that in engage, they have the teacher behavior and the student behavior. I noticed that there's a lot of 5E model instruction that shows you what the teachers are doing and what they're doing, which I think is really important. Helps us kind of see what the expectations are. And you'll notice when they say ask questions, they're wanting our students to ask questions. That's a difficult task. To ask good questions is definitely a practice and a skill that students have to learn. So when we talk about engaging them, they are asking those questions. They are listening, right? When I'm thinking of young ones, we're doing a lot of beginning skills and learning those. When you look at explore, it connects to this wonder and investigate. And then we have explain. When I look at explanation, explains and listens, defines and questions. So they're still questioning. They're questioning throughout this whole thing, right? The whole process of learning whatever it is that they're experiencing. Uses previous observations and findings and provides reasonable responses to questions. So they're really looking, it's almost kind of migrating, investigate, and construct, right? And then when they go to extend and elaborate, they're starting to move towards express, okay? Now, the one thing that I noticed, they don't have a straight reflect, but if you noticed in evaluate, it says answers open-ended, it provides reasonable responses and explanations. So I think their additional questions kind of stops there, but this is just one explanation from CSRC scope. I think I've seen in other models with a 5E where the evaluate, they'll add that reflection piece where they ask further questions. So it's quite a process.
You know, I just want to make a comment that the process is, you know, been around for science people. You know, we think that we've known this process for a long time. But honestly, as far as really encouraging the right questions from students, that's always been a difficult challenge.
It has. And you know, the scientific method can also, when you're teaching kids how to do the scientific method, I think in the past, traditionally, it was very guided. It was a guided science activity. When it's guided, the teacher sets up the questions, they set up the experiment, they even so much as set up their guides. Now with younger ones, you will do that. But I think the one difference is that we're asking the students to create these questions throughout. And I think back in the day, which I know in my time, and even when I was younger, right, we didn't really ask students to ask questions so much, but to tell them what we observed, right, and to tell them what we think is happening. We're getting to those concepts, but not really eliciting the inquiry and the feedback that we expect kids to have today. It's a voice. We're giving them a voice. So when I went ahead and grabbed the NGS, and we've got the science and engineering practices. Those practices is pretty much inquiry. So science and engineering inquiry. So they're asking questions and defining problems, developing and using models, planning and carrying out investigations, analyzing, interpreting data. You can see where it kind of just shifts and goes around in this circle. Now, know that the Stripling model is cyclical, but it can go back and forth. You can reflect after you investigate and then go back to construct. And kids do, you know, when you actually really think and it's messy, it doesn't look that pretty with the arrows, right? It goes everywhere. With the science, you're doing a little bit more. You've got mathematics and computational thinking. In both, you still construct explanations, right? What do you think is going on? What did you see that made you think that, and what is going on, right? You're kind of getting them to come to some kind of understanding. And engaging in argument from evidence, and that's tough. That is more for 4th to 5th grade. Even 4th is young, but 4th to 5th grade on is really when they're starting to engage in that argument from evidence and obtaining, evaluating, and communicating information. Now that's for all. And that's a difficult one. And that's where our STEMs come into play, especially with elementary, and I would even say all the way up to high school. If the students aren't taught to how to communicate their thinking, STEMs are going to be really helpful. I noticed that blah, 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 blah. And, you know, I think so-and-so because I saw this, right? It's getting them to be able to express themselves and be able to communicate their thinking in a way that helps them get to those core concepts. And also kind of talk to each other respectfully. So I think I bring in a little bit of that collaborative talk kind of strategies. I agree with so-and-so when, you know, this person thought this. So I really like the STEMs, and that helps with that communication. So looking at primary sources, and where does this fit in when we're looking at inquiry? Well, you know, when we went back and looked at the Stripling model, she advocates going through this cycle when we look through a source. So what I wanted to do is just to kind of have us take a look at these sources. There's 3, and I know they're somewhat small, but hopefully you can kind of see them. And I just want you to kind of read through the headlines of the first one. This comes from an article in 1931. The next one, it says a gang plow. And the next one, a Dust Bowl farmer. And the latter 2 was from 1936. So I just want you to notice some of the details. And Lucy and Danielle, if you don't mind, I want you to start sharing some details that you notice or see.
I've done this activity not just in training, but I've also done it with kindergarten, and it's very interesting to see these articles and the pictures through their eyes. When you look at this, you know, I would look at, it says gang plow. I'm not familiar with what a gang plow is, but then I can see it's like, looks like it's in some kind of a field or something like that. So that's where I would start when I introduce this type of thing to a kindergarten classroom. It's like, what exactly do you see, kind of thing.
Good. So you noticed the field, and then you had a wonder. You wondered what a gang plow was. It's a particular type of plow. What did you notice about those, the actual plow?
Just, it seems from the picture, it seems like it's a large piece of machinery.
Yeah, large piece of machinery. With those big blades. So I see really large blades. So what do you think about those blades?
Probably sharp, maybe for digging in the earth.
Yeah.
You know, using your prior knowledge of what a plow does, and then looking at the object in the picture and where it's positioned.
Right. So when we look at these, what I like to do with students, and I'm just gonna, I won't show that yet. So since you know the observe, reflect, and question process, visually, I love to be able to show that to the kids, right? They need to see how our thinking evolves and what bucket does that fall into. So when I see a detail, I put it in the I see column or observation column. And then when I think about something, sometimes kids don't automatically go to think. Sometimes a lot of times that's the first thing they go to. I think that they're going to dig into the ground, right? So then I'm automatically going to draw them back into, what did you see that make you think that this machine is going to dig into the ground? What did you see? And then I'm going to list that in that column. So what I'm doing is letting them see the difference between details and observations that they see, and then what they think about those details, especially the wondering. So your wondering game cloud actually came from the caption. So then I would put, okay, so you notice that there's a caption, right? So if I'm looking at understanding text, that's a really good thing that they probably transferred over from reading. So game plow, and you notice that you don't know what a game plow is, so there's where your question came from. So I'm being very intentional about where their thinking and their wonderings are coming from the source, right? So that's how I'm making them more concrete about anchoring their thinking to details, okay? And anchoring their questions to details. It helps them focus, and it lets them see how they pull it apart. Also, if I feel like that there's some weakness within the reflection or questioning process, or maybe they don't have enough details, they didn't go deep enough, I'm going to ask them, let's see what else we can see when we think about this, or what else we see when we wonder about this. So I'm really having them weave through those three columns in a very strategic way as a teacher. And with these three, now with the young ones, you are going to just focus on one, most definitely, right? You want one that's really going to help them dive into your science topic.
I also found that with the younger kids, if there's multiple things that I need to introduce, I split them off in groups and give them each one, and then give them the opportunity to discuss with the group.
That's great. See, and that's great. You can do that with kindergarten. It's amazing what they can talk about. So if they learn how to do that process, pretty soon you won't have to do it as much. And hopefully by the end of the year, they're just rocking it, right? You can bring a source in and they start talking about the details they see. And they're starting to ask those questions and feel very comfortable about that and make predictions. And so I think it's a great idea. It's almost kind of like allowing them to be in groups and having multiple sets, because you don't have as much time. So with that said, this is at a higher level. I would say this is going to be more with our 5th grade, learning at Dust Bowl and up. So 4th and 5th grade. So take a look at these sources. It says huge task and drought aid met by Red Cross. So we talked about a drought. If we're thinking science, right, or STEM, we've got drought. Danielle brought up machinery with the gang plow. And then we have the Dust Bowl farmer. And how does that picture look? How does that farm look?
It looks barren to me.
Oh,
I mean, it looks so sad. And what is he possibly plowing at that point?
Right. Like, what is he digging up? It looks like a pole. You can see a cow in the background. And I don't even know what that is right there. We could normally enlarge that. This looks like almost like a bird, but I'm sure it's not. Maybe it's something just hanging on something. So it was really dry, right? And we know from a dust bowl that they had allowed a lot of dust storms come through. So the science behind this is a couple of things, right? That the dust bowl, so hopefully what I'm doing is creating 3 sources that what we say talk to one another. Right? That we hope that students can make this connection or begin to ask questions. What does the drought have to do with this plow or this other picture of the farmer? Right? What does the plow have to do with farming in the 1930s? Or, you know, with the drought itself. So the background of this is that the drought paired with new farming techniques helped cause the Dust Bowl. Right? It wasn't just one by itself. So there's some argument that these plows, you know how you said they were large, Danielle?
Yeah.
Those blades, they started getting longer and longer and larger so that they could pull up more ground. Well, the problem is they were depleting a lot of the great resources that were occurring, and things couldn't grow. So after over plowing, basically, when the dust storm came and we had the drought, it made it even worse, right? There was nothing that could grow. They were having problems growing things. So the pairing of the two created the really horrible Dust Bowl event. And so when they start looking at soil and how does soil dry out and nutrients, and there's a science kit for that. So looking at machinery and inventions, looking at the pros and cons. What do they do for us? Increase production, but then we didn't anticipate how badly it was going to deteriorate our land and our soil. So now they put nutrients back in, right? So the practice has changed. So when we're thinking about what it is that's either we want to see cause and effect. So the first two is the cause and effect of the third, or do we want to show change, right? Do we want kids to notice those patterns? So I think primary sources, if we want, we could have them come up and used within a STEM activity to help them talk about those cross-cutting concepts that we might want to introduce within our curriculum. But I also think that if we do the ORQ process, we're connecting them to these inquiry practices, right? These science and engineering inquiry practice. We're helping them practice inquiry is what we're doing. We're having them ask questions and develop. So not only are they doing this with primary sources, when they do an experiment, we want them to do the same thing. What did you see? What did you think about what you saw? What do you wonder? And what did you see that made you wonder that? It's the same process, but across what we're doing. And I love the fact that we can use that same simple process over and over again to help our kids critically think and be able to communicate their thinking and ask questions, of course. And so, of course, that goes back that ORQ process, that I see, think, and wonder, observe, reflect, and question, does that with the Stripling model, but it also does it with the 5E. Gotta love it, right? Like as a teacher, it's always like, especially elementary, Danielle, you know, we've got so many models for every subject. So, you know, I'm always trying to take the simplicity piece and how do I carry that through, right? Getting the best bang for our buck. Mm-hmm. So with the ORQ, this is the analysis tool the library has. Teachers have put an I over here with maybe a brain or thinking, and then a question mark here for I see, I think, I wonder. And then what do we still wonder even after we're done? Because a lot of times when we're truly investigating something, we never find an ending answer. There's always more we want to know. We just run out of time, right? So we have to put a pin in it and kind of get to it later. But there's other sources that we can bring in that can engage students in inquiry. And it could be just one source, right? As much as, like, for example, we can do the flight with the Wright brothers. And how did that change transportation? You know, I'm kind of getting more in the elementary mode, but if we think of Edison and electricity, that's a good one, right? In elementary, the light bulb, I think we do that in kindergarten, don't we? Do we still do that? So there's a lot of neat, there's tons of Thomas Edison in there, and the light bulb, the car battery, which is really big. The car battery was pretty huge. I love to get the kids diving into that, the telephone. So inventions is kind of an easy bring in, but you also have, this is the Carl Sagan, where he has the Earth as the center. So kind of looking at that's not his, it was from 1500, but it was in his collection as a way of showing how we have over time evolved in our thinking about what space is, what it looks like, and how we've changed our views of what it looks like. And then you've got this learning to walk. This is right after World War I with prosthetics. I really like that idea because that's helping our students identify the problem and the need, which is very important when we go into science and STEM. That you're always having the kids identify problem and solutions. So taking a look at this, we're giving them context. This is World War I, and many, many, many soldiers were coming back with missing limbs. So it presented a need, right? So there's this technology that's needed to help these soldiers walk better. So you'll see that there's a lot of disability type posters and different things within the library where we can bring something out and have the kids kind of talk about where they see STEM or technology, and then be able to identify a problem and need. You do have to set it up with some background. And then you'll notice the picture of the children here. This is a 5th grade class, and even though that was actually, you can't really tell, but those are civil rights. But what I like is to share a strategy that this tool is just the shell. I always say make sure you anchor their reflections and questions to their details. We make sure you further investigate. But you can make this live, like Danielle said. You could put one source in a group if you want to do multiple sources. This teacher didn't have space in her classroom, so she called it a hallway walk. So instead of a gallery walk, she did a hallway walk, and she did the big paper technique. And that's where they silently write down their observations, reflections, and questions. And what I love what she did this year, being 5th grade, being elementary, she noticed her students weren't transferring the vocabulary use. They weren't using it. They weren't using the vocabulary. They did the vocabulary sheet. They talked about the vocabulary, but she found that when they went through and looked at a source, they weren't applying, they weren't using. So what she did is required them to use one of their vocabulary words when they viewed a source. And that was powerful. So they got to pick the vocabulary word and pick the source, and they had to use it in context. And she said that, you know, she's been working, she's almost near retirement. She said, boy, it took me like 27 years to figure out this strategy. But you know what? I said, hey, we better share it. Something so simple. We do vocabulary instruction. We do I see, I think, I wonder. But sometimes marrying the two and marrying other things that we already do can make that analysis become more valuable. So that was a tip I just wanted to share that's kind of new to us this year, but it worked so well with the kids, and we're seeing other teachers really enjoy that process of transferring and applying that use. And again, it's that same skill we're wanting them to do in science. So how can we get some of these terms, science terms and STEM terms that we want them to use, and then how do we integrate that into an activity like an analysis or during an experiment? So I wanted us to really think about, what does inquiry look like in my classroom? Where do I feel like I fall short? Where do I excel? And where can primary sources be used to improve the student inquiry skills in STEM? So do I want to do it in the beginning, or do I want to do it in the middle? So Danielle, since you're our only live person,
no, we do have, excuse me, we do have someone else, and I unmuted Carol.
Oh, okay, good.
Carol, yeah, she has her lovely son with her. And what is his name, Carol?
How? What's your name, buddy? Say what your name is. Say your name.
It's like, no way.
This is Zachary, everybody.
Hi, Zachary.
Hi, Zachary.
I remember when your mama was waiting to have you. That's for sure, in our class.
Yep.
So it's nice to meet you, Zachary. Definitely.
That's right.
Okay.
And
I'm sorry.
I apologize. I apologize, everyone, for our beginning introduction. I was trying to chase him and figure this out at the same time, so I'm very sorry. I did not mean to be a distraction to the lesson.
No, but I'm thrilled that you're here. So, and Amy, I didn't mean to interrupt you, so please continue.
No, fine. So I really just wanted, after hearing all this, I was hoping that I can answer any questions that you might have, or maybe think about what I've shown you already that might inspire you to think about how you can better incorporate inquiry. So inquiry, looking at the ORQ, right? A process of getting our kids to think more deeply, ask better questions, Primary sources can help us connect to the past and inform the future. Looking at our technology then and now, it helps our kids notice details, right? And just our basic skills and infer and better communicate their ideas. I think that's a big one. Making thinking visible is huge. It's hard to capture, and then we don't know how to communicate it. So ideas and questions, anything.
One of the activities I've done with the primary sources is I've found my lessons are around weather. So I found various, and being kindergarten, I use pictures because that's the easiest way for them to make a connection. Reading an article to them and stuff, I might take excerpts, but to make it a real connection for kindergarten, I use a lot of the photographs and the pictures. What I've done is I've used, in one of the lessons I had various pictures from the Library of Congress. Some were pictures of weather, some of them were pictures of meteorological equipment. And then I found some newer pictures and I passed them out, and then I gave them to the students, and then I discussed, well, some of these are from long ago and some of these are from today. And then we went around each group and asked, well, do you think this is from long ago or today? And had them explain why they thought it was from long ago. And some of them caught on right away. Well, there's no color on this picture, or this one has lots of colors. I've seen this. So it really helped them make the connection to things from long ago by having the picture in their hand in their group, and they were able to compare it to pictures of today side by side. So then after we discussed in these 4 groups, if they thought the picture was from long ago or from today, then we discussed, well, which one do you think is the oldest? And then which one do you think? And then they stood up in line and basically made a timeline of the pictures that I provided.
Yeah, oh, that's great. Because that's tough. That's a really tough skill for kindergarten. You know, it really is. This concept of time, I mean, a minute ago.
Yeah.
It's a long time. I mean, it's a tough concept, even for first grade, and I would even do second grade. But yeah, no, I think that's great. Did you find any challenges that your students had to overcome, or?
I mean, definitely the challenge is, like you said, having that the understanding of time and what it meant, and kind of having to, they don't necessarily have that prior knowledge of a black and white photo necessarily means it's most likely from long ago. So having to add that knowledge base, and made the lesson quite a bit longer than it had intended, but definitely I feel like they got a lot out of it. Even a month and a half, 2 months later, they're like, hey, that was like that picture we saw. So that they are able to generalize the information and transfer, and it is making an impression, which when I first signed up for this, I was like, how am I going to have kindergarten be involved with the Library of Congress? That, you know, it just really blew my mind. And then the more I get into doing this, it's pretty amazing that kindergartners can get a sense of there's something out there that has this kind of information available to them.
Well, and I love the fact that you're teaching them already at 5 and 6 to look closely and ask questions about what they see, right? It's more structured for them. And they ask questions that they could flow from anywhere, like, what's that dog? And, you know, well, they do want to tell you a story, right?
Definitely.
Right? And then so you're holding in on, no, wait a minute, we just want a question. And, but at the same token, you're giving them a structure. And I love it. Starting that so young, because that's going to help those kids when they go to museums. They're going to be so much more appreciative when they grow up, because they're going to already have that skill closely and asking questions based on what they see. You know, they're going to be able to ask good questions. You watch, you keep doing it.
I think that's great. I wish I would have known more about the Library of Congress when I was teaching kindergarten. So I think it's fantastic that you're working with 5 and 6-year-olds and introducing them to it. It's great.
Carol is Carol is an instructional coach now for grades K through 8, and when she came through the program and she became a coach, she actually did science as a project on electricity. So, and it was a hard time to do that, but she did a really meaningful job for her students.
Thank you. Thank you. And actually, just this last week, I was working in a 4th grade classroom, and we are actually beginning our research on civil rights events. And we did stations where each station was a different event. And we've already done some background knowledge, but we started by introducing the entire unit with a primary source where basically it was just a picture with 2 doorways, and one said white and one said colored. And I teach in a school district that has, or at least my school has, like a 92% African American population, and the children were just so upset. They were, it took them a little while, to look at the image, but once they realized what they were seeing, their mouths dropped open and they said, "What?" And they got very angry and upset. And, we knew it was going to be it was going to throw them a little bit, but we were so glad that we started that way to really start to help them understand what life was like, 50 years ago, and what they may have encountered in the South at that time. So then, like I said, this past week, we followed up with stations. You okay, buddy? With stations, sorry, where they traveled to each one, and there were 2 primary sources and 1 secondary source at the station, and they had to determine the difference between the primary and the secondary sources because they've had some difficulty doing that. And then that was after we had done the analysis of the first one. So they kind of knew, and we walked them through asking questions and talking about what they observed and what they were reflecting on. So it was really good, but I really enjoyed I'm glad you showed the picture that you did, because I would really like to take that to another level then and try the gallery walk or try the hallway walk. I thought that was a really neat idea. The stations were great and they did record their thoughts for us, but I like the idea of having a classroom-based artifact with everyone thinking in one place. I think that could be really powerful. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Carol.
Yeah, and I think it just, having them use that vocabulary seemed like an easy thing to, like, why didn't we do that a long time ago? But when you require them, and then she was able to really pre-assess them because they wouldn't use a couple of those words because that nobody really understood what they meant. So she realized that she needed to go back and really talk about it. I mean, they're hard stuff in 5th grade. I mean, it's Jim Crow laws.
Yeah.
Even though someone did pick that, but there were some terms they did not use and they shied away from it. And so she knew exactly what she needed to kind of dive into. And she actually used the Martin Luther King speech to start the vocabulary, and did it with one primary source before they went into all. But she uses primary source all year long through all her studies, her literature, her social study. She doesn't teach science. The other teacher, 5th grade teacher, does. But they try to engage them in that same thought process, and it does help. I mean, those kids feel much more comfortable explaining their thinking and their thoughts, and really investing in that learning process. And I think that that's what this inquiry-based learning is all about. I really do. And when we see what we do with that, then what kind of sources are we going to pick and choose that'll make the greatest impact when we're learning about, like weather tools, and like Danielle said, or invention, or disasters, so just whatever we're diving into. So I do appreciate you guys sharing ideas, because that's how we all learn and grow together. Tell ya.
Absolutely. Can you detail the vocabulary strategy again? I thought I understood you saying that they selected a vocabulary word from the primary source. Yeah.
So what Cheryl did is she had vocabulary from her unit curriculum that she needed to cover, and she didn't pick all of them because she said, she doesn't have a huge amount of time to do social studies per week. So she picks from her unit, and she picks some from Martin Luther King's speech, because there are a lot of thematic type words that carries across the different units. So she pulls those. And so she had probably like a good 8 to 10. And then they go over that with the speech, and they talk about what those mean as one lesson. And then the next time they met, she had different sources that she chose from. There's a civil rights set within the teacher's page. She pulled some of those and grabbed a couple others and tried to fit them to the words the best she could. That would help them want to use those words. And some of them you could use a couple of different vocab words. And she said the requirement was that they had to, and she had them actually in stations. That hallway walk was one. She has 27 kids. So that was one station in the hallway. Then she had 2 other groups, one doing a secondary source reading, and the other group was doing maybe a short video on something. Yeah, she had like 3 different station activities. And the hallway walk was one. So they rotated. So they had to pick a source, and she required them to use a vocab word when they went to see, think, and wonder about their source. So if they said, I wonder if the Jim Crow laws, blah, blah, blah. When I saw this, I wondered that they had to include the vocab word. So then she was able to correct, right? Like if they misused it or had them explain why they used it. And then, of course, she noticed what they didn't use. Yeah. But, and then she noticed that they used it in their next unit. She had several kids. And her struggling writers, they were actually more apt to use it then and talk about segregation when they were talking about Native Americans. And she's like, just like when we were looking at African Americans, and she's like, that's right. She said they were segregated. She couldn't believe it. She's like, oh my goodness. They used the vocab word. So it's a true win and aha moment when a teacher experiences that. You know how that feels.
Absolutely. Yes.
So try it out. Try it out. And if you find anything else, tell Lucy and have Lucy tell me. And I'll share it.
Do anyone have either of you have any other questions or anything else you'd like to contribute?
No, actually, I like hearing, new ideas and stuff, hence why I decided to get the refresher class and, seeing what new things are out there.
Well, you have some great contributions, Danielle, as well as Carol, and so that really makes it active. I know both of you are very active in the class. I'm not really encouraging as much as I should, because I know that some people participated last time with various ways, but I think the people that really are putting into this are contributing and sharing with each other. That's really beneficial for the class. So thank both of you. And Amy,
sure.
Do you have anything else? And otherwise we will let you go.
Oh, hey, have a great Saturday.
Yes. You too.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing and everything. I appreciate it. And goodbye, Zachary.
Oh yeah, he's off playing with magnets right now.
Yeah, that's boring. That's good.
Building with magnets. Yeah, we're at the Homewood Science Center right now because my oldest is in chess club, so we're hanging out.
I think that's great, that hope concept, and I noticed you sent an email to everybody as far as joining or what they could do. So that's really an added feature that's already behind you. So that's good. Yeah. Amy, again, thank you so much. Is it raining in Southern Illinois?
Yes. Horribly.
I think I'm in Memphis, and I think I'm in Seattle lately. It's unbelievable. rain,
Yes,
but
it is.
Anyway, it's all part of it. It's all part
of you don't have snow.
Understanding, yes. Weather strategy. Yeah, I just left a lot of snow in Montana. So, but it was beautiful. Oh. So, well, thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you in class.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Bye now.
Thank you.